Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here. I found it rather curious over the past week that since Mark Carney and his Liberal government tabled their first budget after 18 months of no budget, we actually haven't had a lot of talk in the media about the budget, let alone positive coverage. We've mostly just been talking about federal Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre and his supposed leadership crisis that he's going through right now. Do I think Poilievre is in a leadership crisis? No, I do not. Was it a good look to have Chris d'Entremont cross the floor and join the Liberal government and Matt Generot announce that he is going to be resigning in the spring? Obviously, that's not a good look. I think it's mainly not a good look on Chris d'Entremont because this really has nothing to do with Pierre Poilievre. And if it does, it's probably for an extremely petty issue that Chris had with Pierre. The man's just leaving because he didn't get to become the deputy speaker. And he's like, I guess, felt entitled to that job and he wasn't satisfied being the deputy whip of the Conservative Party. And so he left. He had just gotten over criticizing how much the Liberals are spending like 2 weeks before he left. So obviously, this isn't ideological unless he was lying about his positions before. But let's get back to the real issue at hand. The media does not want to talk about the budget. It's bad. It's not going to be winning Mark Carney a lot of support. In fact, it will be starting to lose him support both on the left flank of his party and the right flank. The NDP, the Bloc hate it. Many Conservative Party voters hate it who ended up giving a vote to the Liberals in this last election because they wanted to stop Trump. They will also see this as another Justin Trudeau budget. So, what better thing to talk about than whatever is going on with Pierre Poilievre and a ginned up leadership crisis? Now, we actually have not had anyone else cross the floor. We kept hearing speculation that any moment now, more conservatives are going to be following behind Chris d'Entremont and joining the Liberal Party. And again, there was speculation that Matt Generot was somebody who was thinking about crossing and then just ultimately decided to fully resign. But he's also made it clear he's still voting against the Liberal budget. He's still opposing the Liberal government. So I've always found that story a little bit dubious. Like, what do they do? Like, threaten his family? You better not cross. Okay, you can resign, but you better not cross, or I'm going to do vague somethings to you. But I want to go through some of these headlines that the media is putting up, and then I want to go over some polling that demonstrates no, Pierre Poilievre is not unpopular, because this is the other narrative they are trying to spin out of this situation, is that it demonstrates that the Canadians don't like Pierre Poilievre because Chris d'Entremont left, because Chris is so stupid that he thinks that he's going to lose the next election as a conservative because the Liberals got within 1% of him. Yeah, they got within 1% in their best showing ever in that riding, in a result they're going to have a very difficult time recreating, if not improving on, because the NDP is not going to be as dead next time. And many people who voted for Carney to stop Trump are naturally going to either stop voting Liberal or they're going to go back to voting for the Conservatives. But here are the current headlines that we have spinning out around the budget. Nothing about the budget. We have how Budget Week turned into a nightmare for Conservatives. Canada's National Observer says Pierre Poilievre's goose is cooked. Politico, a deflection, a resignation, and budget fight inside Carney's pivotal week. Bad week for the Conservatives puts Pierre Poilievre on the defensive. Pierre Poilievre does better than Doug Ford and other possible leaders against Mark Carney. That's the poll we're going to be talking about. But I'm wanting to give you the grand scope of what's going on here. The Conservative Party's bigger problem is bigger than Poilievre. Opinion: the threat of deflection that could puncture Poilievre's swagger. What about the budget? You know that $78 billion deficit we have? That includes $55 billion in it that only goes to debt servicing. We're not talking about this. Like, I know the Liberals are trying to pretend like this is a great thing. Oh, look, we have cost saving measures in the budget. I don't care about you reducing some staff in Ottawa Gatineau if at the same time we're increasing spending far more on the other side of, like, of the ledger. Yes, we have found cost savings here, but if you save $1 billion here, but then you increase $5 billion there, I don't think you actually saved money. I think you just reorganized the waste. Many of these people losing their jobs probably aren't going to lose their jobs. They're just going to be transferred to the new departments that have more money in them. Do you think that the major projects office didn't end up onboarding a bunch of new staff members? They're not just going to fire 15% of these staff. Like I would. There's way too many employees in the federal government. But the Liberals rely heavily on having basically public sector employees vote for them. So they're never going to be heavily reducing the size of the public sector. They may reorganize it. They may move those public sector jobs outside of Ottawa, outside of Gatineau, but they're still going to be there. You don't spend another $40 billion on a green energy grid program without hiring a bunch of consultants and a bunch of other staff members in order to manage the project. But anyways, now let's move on to some other stuff. I just want to actually highlight this one. I want to highlight this one video of the Liberals trying to basically make out their economic performance as very good. We have Evan Solomon speaking here, who is currently the Minister of AI, I believe. Him talking about how many jobs that we've created in the past year.
Here is something to applaud about. We created 67,000 new jobs last month. That's right. Mr. Speaker, this is about building an affordable nation for a nation of builders. This budget does just that. We are building affordable housing for young people. We are creating 100,000 new summer jobs. And Mr. Speaker, we are investing in the tech sector. 800,000 workers, fastest growing job sector in the economy, many for young people. I hope the Conservatives, and many of them do, support this budget.
You think Solomon would be less corny as a presenter in the in the House of Commons, considering that he used to be a literal TV personality? That was a bit over the top, and this doesn't really have to do with the current subject of Poilievre, because I want to get to the poll in a little bit here. But the reason I talked about that clip is just to demonstrate just how thin the actual arguments in favor of the budget are, or just in favor of their economic performance in general. I just put this into Grok because Grok's a good resource for creating data tables. He's talking about how they created 67,000 new jobs in October, and that's not wrong. They created 67,000 new jobs. Fair enough. Where are these jobs coming from? Well, this year so far, and I think these are just how many jobs they've created, not on net though. Net, it's a little bit lower because obviously you lose jobs as you at the same time you're gaining jobs. Canada this year, from actually December of last year to October, has created 229,000 new jobs. I think it's around 170,000 when you take into account those people who have lost their jobs. But look here. In British Columbia, 25,000 jobs created. Manitoba, 5,000. Saskatchewan, 5,000. Ontario, 95,000. Quebec, 15,000. New Brunswick, 6,000. Nova Scotia actually lost 2,000. Prince Edward Island, 3,000. Look at this, though. Alberta, 85,000 jobs. Fourth biggest province. Nearly the most jobs created in the country. Ontario is only 10,000 more than Alberta. And Ontario, as you all know, as, you know, big nerds like myself, I'm just kidding because it's just the most obvious fact on the planet. Like, Ontario, the biggest province, only creates 10,000 more jobs than Alberta. Alberta's job growth rate is 3.3%, and the current job creation, the gain across the entire country is only about 1%. It is being disproportionately carried by Alberta, meaning it is being disproportionately carried by the economy that Danielle Smith is making. And also, many of the jobs that are being created in Ontario are what we call subsidy jobs. The government subsidizes an industry. They give massive grants. They give massive tax breaks to a specific industry that nobody else is getting. And that industry obviously has to then create jobs in order to play ball with the government and get this money. I'm not impressed that the Ontario auto sector and some of the other steel and aluminum, or steel plants and whatnot, are gaining jobs. They're not efficient jobs. We're just giving these companies millions to billions of dollars, and then they agree to hire like 500 more people or whatever, and we do this across the entire sector. You can't make an economy out of this. Where in Alberta, we don't really do much of that. Yeah, there is green energy subsidies I don't like in Alberta as well, but overall, Alberta creates actual jobs, and Ontario and other provinces create fake jobs. So yeah, just basically demonstrating how easily I can poke a hole in this argument that somehow, like, oh, like, goodness, look how great the economy is doing. Yes, in Alberta, if you took Alberta out of the equation, everything looks pretty mediocre. I'm gonna be honest here. So now I'm just gonna go look up David Coletto's numbers that he's just put out recently for who would do well as the Conservative leader. And this kind of demonstrates just how dumb the media's narrative is right now, because you'd suspect that Poilievre, and these numbers were collected in the midst of the unpopularity of supposedly of Poilievre. He is still doing quite well. And when I say still doing quite well, I mean he is literally beating Mark Carney in the next election. Look, this is a hypothetical ballot poll that Abacus Data did. It's a bit small, so maybe I will drag over the whiteboard in a second here. But we have a chart here that shows how different conservative figures, different conservative politicians, past prime ministers, the Ontario's premier Doug Ford would do against Mark Carney's Liberals. We're going to do this on the fly, people. Hopefully you don't mind it. But let's just go over the net numbers on how each of these figures would be doing. I can just grab out some pen here or whatever. Just need 3 colors for the names and whatnot. So we have Pierre Poilievre up here. Pierre Poilievre is currently, right now, up against the Liberals. He is a +2. With him at the helm of the Conservative Party, the Conservatives are leading the Liberals by +2. That sounds pretty good to me, especially because the Conservative vote is so efficient these days. Beating the Liberals by 2 points nationally in the popular vote would actually probably net the Conservatives upwards of like 175 seats or so. Let's now go down to Doug Ford, who himself is barely conservative in any way, shape, or form. I just consider him a liberal or a progressive at this point. He runs the PC Party of Ontario, but it really should just rename itself the Progressive Party. Doug Ford, he would be a +3 for the Liberals if he became the leader of the Conservative Party. Let's go down to someone a little bit more positive. We have Stephen Harper here. Stephen Harper would actually be worse than Doug Ford, but more positive figure. We have the Liberals beating Stephen Harper by 5 points. Let's go down to Jason Kenney, the former Premier of Alberta and former immigration minister federally. He would lose to the Liberals +8 points. Go down a little bit further. We have Caroline Mulroney, a more moderate conservative in Doug Ford's government of Ontario. She would lose by +7 to Mark Carney's Liberal government. We go to Michelle Rempel Garner. We all write down the whole thing to be respectful. MRG. Michelle Rempel Garner would lose by +11 points to the Conservatives. I feel like I have made my point clear here. You are not going to find someone more popular right now than Pierre Poilievre. Now, you could say because the way the question was asked, you are going to have Conservatives reflexively saying, yes, no, I wouldn't vote Conservative if Pierre Poilievre isn't the leader. And you could say, well, some of these people haven't been leader, so they don't get to make the case for why they should be in government instead of the Liberals. But still, if anything, this entire poll question, and I like Abacus Data, they do good work, but this whole poll question could end up having Liberals say, it's going to be Jason Kenney. Oh, I'd vote for Jason Kenney because that Pierre Poilievre guy is so bad. A question like this sometimes incentivizes people to say, oh, of course I'd vote Conservative if it wasn't Pierre Poilievre. But that's not what's happening here. Poilievre, when you stack him up against other names, is still doing very well. This isn't somewhat good. This is very good. Being up 2 points on the Liberals on election day would be fantastic. Doug Ford, he's probably only at a +3 because, yeah, you get some more older liberal PC type voters who like Doug Ford. But overall, he only probably does that well because he's a big name. Stephen Harper does worse. Jason Kenney does worse. Caroline Mulroney does worse. Michelle Rempel Garner does worse. And we have more names on here. Tim Houston would get destroyed by 10 points. We have Mark Mulroney, who would get destroyed by 9 points. Jamil Javani, and I like Jamil Javani, but he's just not enough of a known quantity at this point. He would lose by 13 points. Melissa Landsman apparently would lose by 17 points. So yeah, this is not too bad. oh, Poilievre is unpopular. He's in a leadership crisis. No, no, he is not. This is a stupid talking point. Oh, he lost Chris d'Entremont. He's lost the moderate vote. Matt Genero is leaving. He has lost the moderate vote. Well, apparently he doesn't need it because he's still leading Mark Carney right now. Because going back to this chart, we can just write down the current support levels we see in this poll, including the undecideds. I'll see if I can do this in such a way where you can kind of see it. Right now, this poll would have it that with Poilievre at the helm, conservatives would have 38% of the vote. The liberals would, as naturally, because the conservatives are leading by two, they would be at 36% of the vote. We then also have the NDP. Let's grab orange just for the consistency of it. NDP would be at 7. We then have the Bloc Québécois at 5. And basically the rest doesn't matter. Another party is in purple here, and it's at 4%, which is probably 3% Green and 1% PPC. And here, though, I want to write this down because it's important. We also have undecideds at 10%, and undecideds will tend to split the way that the voter breakdown is already showing. So what you're probably going to have happen is with 10% of the vote there, you'd have the NDP probably shoot up another 1. You'd probably have the Conservatives go up another 3.5. The Liberals go up another 2. The Bloc grab 1 or 2, and then maybe a Green Party and the PPC gaining another half a point between each other. But this is currently a very healthy outlook for the Conservatives. And there's a lot of growth potential here because right now the Liberals are going to have to actually market their budget. They can distract, the media can pretend the budget doesn't matter right now because we're talking about Pierre Poilievre. But eventually, the Liberals are going to have to justify why the economic performance of the country is not living up to their massive deficits. Why a lot of other issues have not actually been significantly resolved since they got into office. Their new approach on crime is really not going to do anything. They put up a law that is going to very minorly make it more difficult to get out on bail. If you strangled a domestic partner, you will not be granted bail. Okay, that applies to no crimes. Is it serious? Should those people be held on bail? Yes. But you know what? A lot of people should be held on bail. Repeat offenders, repeat shoplifters. And the thing is, yes, the laws that they're passing give a little bit more ability for prosecutors to make sure that these people are held in prison. But the thing is that they have not wiped out things like the Gladue principle or Bill C-75 that make it that same-day automatic release is the standard unless prosecutors can very quickly, in the nanosecond of time before they release a guy, that why a judge should hear why this person should be held and then they should be kept in prison pre-trial. That's just one of many issues. We still have a drug crisis. We still have, again, a lot of industries in Canada that are dying no matter what the job numbers say. The job numbers look good on a macro level, but when you actually look at the taxpayer money that's going to just subsidize those jobs to keep them, it's not very good at all. In provinces like British Columbia, where they frankly ran out of money and they can't subsidize any more jobs, that's why, even though they're the third biggest province, they only gained 25,000 jobs this year so far, where Alberta has 85,000. Because Alberta is a healthier economy despite having the absolute gorilla of the federal government sitting on top of it. But anyways, this should be pretty much it for me today, guys. The polling wasn't as in depth as previous. It was pretty much just these two stats that they had released. But I think that this is all a very good thing to be looking at, to give you a sober-minded view of what is happening. Because the media is trying to, I think, make conservatives flinch, and at the leadership review say we have to get rid of Poilievre because, well, we're in a crisis and we look bad in front of Canadians. Guys, these polls, this stuff, because they only polled the different leaders because of the leadership crisis. It's not David Coletto's fault. It's not Abacus Data trying to stir anything up. It's an interesting question raised by the media. If Poilievre is in a leadership crisis, who could do a better job? Nobody. Poilievre is the only one who is positively polling on Carney. Not close, leading. And he has the wind at his sails to probably gain a lot of this 10% undecided vote. The budget, it's not going to be popular. The thing is, it's going to cause massive inflation. And the problem with spending so much on projects as your big claim to claim to fame, I guess, your claim to governance. That's a really stupid thing for Mark Carney to do. He'd have been smarter to just give a big tax cut and then make everyone like him right away. By doing infrastructure projects, you are guaranteeing that nobody is going to care for at least 4 or 5 years because none of the projects are going to be done right away. He was on a panel recently where he talked about the pipeline discussion is so boring. Yeah, we will be pursuing a pipeline. Well, at this rate, even if he says yes to a pipeline, it's not going to be done before the next election. It's probably not even going to be started. It's just going to be talk like all of his other major projects. That's the problem, is that it's really difficult to run on talk. And even in that clip of Evan Solomon talking about the job numbers, aside from the job numbers, when he says, we're building homes for young Canadians, we're creating 800,000 new tech sector jobs. No, they're saying that they will attempt to do that. That doesn't actually mean they've done it. They're simply running on intentions. They're simply marketing their budget on intentions, not actual follow through. And if budget intentions actually equaled follow through, then Justin Trudeau has already made us all millionaires and we have nothing to worry about, which I believe we can all tell is not true. Anyways, so with that being said, thank you guys for watching the show. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, do all that other fantastic stuff. Thank you for supporting the channel, and I will be back next time.